License to Kill is sponsored by Sterifab, Swarm Pest Control Marketing, and Pest Patrol. Sterifab delivers clean kills with a single spray, disinfect and eliminate pests instantly. Swarm Pest Control Marketing is a digital marketing partner, and Swarm Mastermind helps leaders scale with confidence. And a special thanks also to Pest Patrol for supporting our mission to make LTK agents the best in the field.
Hi, I'm Marcus, and welcome to the License to Kill podcast, where pest control professionals meet cutting-edge expertise, industry insights, and a whole lot of camaraderie. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting your journey as a PMP, this podcast dives into everything that makes our industry tick. From advanced techniques and groundbreaking products to hilarious field stories and the real talk about the challenges we face in our industry. Join us as we explore the science, art, and community behind pest control, celebrating the people who work tirelessly to keep our world safe, healthy, and pest-free. As always, stay sharp, stay connected, stay legendary. Let's start the show.
And welcome in, guys. Thank you so much for joining the License to Kill show. Today we have a special guest and someone I'm so excited to get a chance to talk to, Miss Morgan Manderfield, BCE, or as we like to call her in the Discord, Saturnid. She is by far one of the most active members in the group, an incredible entomologist who's always pointing us in the right direction and keeping us on our toes as far as our accuracy, and she's a beloved member of the community, a beloved member of the group. And she's also a senior entomologist at Ecolab, so she has a ton of experience, has seen some of the biggest accounts that our industry has to offer, and there's a ton of stuff that we're excited to dive into today. But Morgan, tell us a little bit about you, and where you graduated from, and what got you into becoming a BCE?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Marcus, first of all, for having me. It's great to be here. It's my first industry podcast. First podcast ever, so this is cool. This is great. I'm glad to break this seal with LTK. So, as mentioned, I'm senior entomologist at Ecolab. I have been in the industry almost 8 years, all with Ecolab, and I know that that's a small number for a lot of folks. No. We got some giants in the industry, but I've been a bug person for my entire life. So small number of years in the industry, but lots of years with just the everything bug. So, I think like a lot of people, the pest control industry is like you either fall into it or you're born into it. And I definitely fell into it. So I actually hated pest control when I was in college. I was like, I'm never going to do that. I'm better than that. I would never kill, I'll get to that in a second. I keep reacting.
No offense taken. I love it.
It's true. I'm a true convert. So I, in college, I'm like, I'm going to study butterflies. I'm going to describe new beetles in the Amazon. And guess how much money there is in that?
Tons of it, just billions and billions of dollars, right?
No. I wish. Yeah. I truly wish. But no, nobody cares. I'll be honest, nobody cares. What people do care about is there are bugs in my restaurant, there are bugs in my bed, these types of things. So that's where the work is. That's where the need is. Yep. And so that's where the jobs are. Yep. And I bit my pride. I swallowed my pride. And, a little while after college, I was like, okay, so pest control, whatever. I want to work with bugs, right? That's where the jobs are. And so I applied to a lab technician job at Ecolab. And For those who don't know, Ecolab has a massive research facility. So it's Ecolab, a huge global company, just like the Rentokil Terminix, Anti-Cemex, these big names. And so in the lab, we raise bugs and we perform product and equipment evaluations on these bugs. And so they need people to be in the lab and raise these colonies of insects. And so that's where I got my start. And Ecolab has been very good to me, and they paid for my master's degree and they sponsored my BCE, and they are hugely supportive of, my continued education and development. So I love it.
Well, I have actually been a little jealous of the Ecolab team because I've talked to technicians out in the field and they've told me about the extensive investment that Ecolab puts into their technicians and their training by taking everybody and sending them up to this facility. I think they do like several weeks up there. I mean, it's not just a walk-in tour for a afternoon and then you're gone. I mean, they really do that. And so I've heard that the facility is incredibly state-of-the-art. I've heard that it's a massive campus, that there's a ton of stuff going on, from classes to, actually getting in there, putting on the gloves and dissecting the various different insects and stuff. And that is, a lot of the bigger companies get a pretty bad rap. And in all fairness, I've, been a part of slinging some of that mud at some points in myself. But I've never really heard anything ever bad about Ecolab's training or their education or the investment that they do, and it really does show in your performance in the Discord and in the LTK and other communities too. You're such an avid person in the Facebook communities and stuff, that you pour out knowledge that is it is the top tier, right? I mean, it's the gold standard, and let's be honest, we're so thankful for that. Recently, I attended my local pest control association meeting just the other night, and there was a new guy who was new to the association. He's in the Discord, but he's only ever lurked. He came in and, he's got this pest with him in a bag, and he's a small operator. He's only been operating for about 2 years, and he's got this challenged customer, and he's had to go back 4 or 5 times. I don't know, maybe say that many times, but he's had to go back several times to figure this out. And within, I want to say, I posted at 7:10, and by 7:11, literally a minute later, there's a not just a simple answer or common name. I mean, you gave the scientific name, exactly what's going on, where they're going to see them, what, how that you would identify that. And I feel like that just levels us up to the next level. I mean, it really helps us, remind ourselves, especially, the blue collar people out in the field, that this is that trade that people do invest a career into, and they invest their education into. They go through college. I mean, this is a very serious science-based industry, and I know we all kind of intuitively feel that with the chemistry. I feel like manufacturers get a lot of the kind of accolades for coming out with this new product or that new product, but the truth is, it all begins with the work that you do, and that's such an incredible thing. I kind of wanted to touch a little bit on AI. So obviously I'm a bit of an advocate for AI. I do like it. That's okay. I like AI pretty good. I don't think it's perfect technology, but I think I get excited by its infancy. I get excited by the potential that's there. And you kind of have a different take on that. So tell me a little bit about what you've seen with the AI space and how that's maybe challenging your throne in this industry, and what you're doing to stay on top of that.
Sure. Yeah. So AI, is this massive beast of a thing, and there are so many different applications of it. I'm totally not here to knock it all down and just be like, you should never use it, or there's no good application, because that's totally not true. As the evidence is out there, right? There's all kinds of awesome ways to use it. But I will say that as somebody deeply passionate about insect identification, I have concerns about the tools that are currently out there for insect identification. For these AI apps, ChatGPT will claim to be able to identify your insect for you, and this was actually the subject of my master's thesis. So, as part of my master's final project, I picked evaluating 3 of the most popular insect identification apps on the market. And so what I did was I took, I think it was 100 photos, and I ran each photo through 3 apps. Picture Insect, which is like a fan favorite. Seek, which is produced by iNaturalist, and that's kind of like a nature cataloging website, but they have their own app for AI identification. And then Google Lens. And since I did that, this is several years ago now, since I did that, there are more tools that are becoming available, and I have played with them, but that master's degree project really focused on those 3. I ran every photo through those 3 apps, and every photo I identified myself, and then I had a colleague of mine also identify them, and she's fantastic at identification. So it was really each photo had a minimum of 2 entomologists verify this is what this thing is. And then we compared that to the result from each of the apps. And I actually published this, a summary of this in PCT Magazine in January. So that's out there. You can search for it if you want to like see the data tables and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So what, broadly speaking, what I found was another facet of this was actually looking at photo quality. So all of these apps report like, 95% accurate. And that's really only possible if you're feeding it perfect photos every time.
Right.
We know that nobody's doing that, right? Nobody's submitting microscope quality photos every single time because we're in the field or we're receiving these from clients who cannot take a photo to save their lives.
Yes.
Right. And so imperfect photo, like realistic quality photos was really important to me to include in this study because that's the types of photos that we're using. And so overarchingly, what I found was across the board, when you combine all the different image qualities or photo qualities, like really top tier to low tier, you get about 50% accuracy for each of these apps.
Okay.
When you only feed it perfect photos, you get about 70%, which some people is like, oh, that's pretty good. Somebody recently, actually, it was Andrew Sinevsky. He posted to LinkedIn that he's been looking at ChatGPT in the same way. Right. And he found that ChatGPT was also about 70% accuracy, which is nothing to like turn your nose up at completely. But I like the way that he put it. He said, like, that's a C student. Like, do you want a C student identifying your, when it comes down to it, like you're there, you need a proper identification to be able to do your job effectively. Do you want a C student to be doing that?
Right.
I don't know. But so that's just taking the result at face value, which I strongly caution people to don't do that, right? Yeah. So these are tools. It's a tool in the toolbox, and you can certainly use them, but know that going into when you're using them, like 50 to 70% accurate here, right? And so it's totally up to you, the user, to receive these identifications, receive these results, and then do your homework, right? And follow up and look this thing up. A lot of times these apps are giving you results that are like, that doesn't even occur on this continent. And so is it a weird introduction that is super rare and you're the first person to discover it in this
new
country?
invasive species?
Maybe, but more than likely the app is just showing you a UK species because that's what the image, that's what the image recognition is like. Yeah, it's probably this, right? So it's just take it with a grain of salt, like a big grain of salt. Use it, but know its limitations is basically my piece, right?
So I think the 70% mark on the identification, I think you really hit the nail on the head, especially when it comes to like food handling facilities, hospitals, places where disease or any kind of vector or contaminations are going to be a real big, major issue. Mm-hmm. But then I feel like also sometimes like on the other side of that coin, like, is anybody collecting data on what the identification rate is out there for the average tech, like particularly that 1 to 5 year range, those new guys coming out the gate? I don't want to say that we're probably worse than the 50% mark, but there's a lot of bugs out there, and a lot of them look very similar. And as these tools get better and maybe they're able to incorporate your phone's GPS coordinate and stuff like that it'll be able to kind of rule out some of these crazy options that are coming from or rank order them to say like, hey, it's a possibility this is coming from the Caribbean, but probably less likely if you're in Michigan or something, And so I guess I am hopeful for it, but as someone who does service a lot of those kind of types of commercial accounts, I think the human level accuracy that you are able to bring to the table and that caution that you have for some of these tools is completely warranted. And if anything, it makes these tools better, right? If we all just kind of accepted it on the first iteration, then it would have no need to continue to self-improve. But when somebody's able to point it out, call to the carpet, and say, wrong, hit the red buzzer, totally incorrect, that forces, whether it's some of these companies that may invest in a more niche application, or even just a passionate developer out there, maybe a college student who's going through, their master thesis a few years from now, right? Or maybe they're working with the university on some kind of project where, they take this deficiency that they recognize and then push that to the next level. And so, I think it's funny because we may be on opposite sides, but we're on the same team. It's like we do want the best for the industry, and being overly optimistic is probably a tad dangerous. So I'm really, really glad there's counterpart people in the industry like you who are smart and wise, but also studious, and you're not going to let the small details slip past. I think especially with us as technician type entities, we're in the field, we're moving really fast, we've got a bunch of stops we got to get through. We're just not taking the time to really to really hone in on those details, and that's something that you have the capacity to do. But I think kind of tying it into the LTK Discord, right? Like, we may not have that, but we can take the quick picture, snap it, okay, photo, tag entomologist, and keep rolling, and I can come back to my phone when I get back to my truck several minutes later, and bam, there's contributors like you who are putting that out there and putting out the correct information, and that helps so much, because when you do have a actual problem species, a lot of times knowing how to attack it is everything, right? Most sprays kill bugs, and a lot of labels have just this long running list of things but if you're not putting that product in the right place, if you're not targeting their feeding behavior, if you're not targeting their actual, harborage behavior, things like that, then you're just not going to be successful, right? And so, again, just kind of calling out to that example from the other night, you pointed out, hey, this is a bagworm type, but here's the specifics to it, right? And here's where I would look, or here's how I would address that issue. It goes such a long way, and I know that person was incredibly thankful, but I was incredibly thankful in that moment, because here I am at the association, and I'm able to say, like, hey, look, this is working, this happens in real time, and that's how we put our human brain power together and push back against some of the AI stuff. I know everybody's buying in on AI, and they're building all these facilities, but it's brain power and human capital that got us to where we're at. We can't abandon that yet. So
yeah,
just a long way of saying thank you, but I do feel like it's definitely validated. So tell me a little bit about, since you are in these spaces, tell me a little bit about your experience. When did you start getting into the online spaces? When did you start participating in the various different pest control groups? Which ones are you in, and are there any that are worth checking out if anybody's out there, maybe they're looking for a new group?
Sure. Yeah. So I think just before pandemic time, I would say, is when I really ramped up my involvement in the bug scene, particularly on Facebook. We call it Bug Book. There's a whole network of bug groups on Facebook. And yeah, I will say that Facebook as a platform is very criticizable. There's a lot to hate about it, frankly. But what keeps me on that platform are the groups. And, the entomology group specifically is really where I got started. In fact, when I applied for my Ecolab job as a lab technician, somebody on my interview team, she is the person she's our identification guru in-house. It's actually not me. Okay. It's somebody else.
Okay.
And she does this day in and day out. And as she was interviewing me, she said, "So how comfortable are you with identification? What's your skill level? What's your comfort level?" And I said, "Well, in my in every free minute that I have, I'm looking at bugs on Facebook and I'm answering people's identification questions." So very comfortable with that. Very involved with that. I'm one of the administrators for the Facebook group Entomology, which is a massive group. It's 500,000 people, public group for all things entomology. And so that's really kind of where I play around the most. But I'm involved in a lot of general entomology groups and insect identification groups. I'm very picky about where I hang out because, as you know, and as I've alluded to, Facebook is there's so many icky places. You really got to find the pockets of good. And I'm sure every platform is like this. I know Reddit is like this as well. on the whole, like this community might not be great, but they're treasures, right? And so I've spent a lot of time trying to find where the good ones are, and really any like if you're looking for like an entomology group, like anything that is really tightly moderated and run by actual entomologists or arachnologists or other specialists is definitely what I would advise. There are a lot of groups out there that just kind of let anything go in the comments, and you'll get crazy control advice and you'll get misidentifications out the wazoo. And for somebody who's trying to learn, it can be really like disorienting. Like, I don't know where the truth is. I don't know where the legitimate information is in here. And so it's really hard to learn in an environment like that. And so I love, as a group, entomology. I love Ant-Man's Hill is a really fun one. They're a bit more laid back. They're like a bit friendlier to newcomers. I will say entomology is a little bit buttoned up and a little stricter, a little bit more like we're a science group here. Ant-Man's Hill is great. And insect identification is another great one. And these are all places that you can go. I mean, I know that you've talked about the value of LTK as a community where you can just throw a bug and somebody will answer you within a short amount of time, and that's really valuable. There are other places for that as well. So you can just blast your photo out there, and a lot of people are critical of like just putting it on Facebook, but really, you find those great communities, those little pockets of good, and you'll get in touch with real experts, right? Like real people who know their stuff. So that's kind of like the general entomology side of things that I like to play around in. And I think a lot of people may also recognize me from Pest Cemetery. I'm very active on Pest Cemetery. I have learned a lot from Pest Cemetery. Like, as much as I kind of like lean in and help out and provide information about insects, I've also learned a ton because, as mentioned, I've only been in the industry for almost 8 years. And so there are people in this Discord, I'm sure, and definitely at Pest Cemetery that have been around for a lot more than that. And so there's just a ton of wisdom to be gathered, right, from these spaces.
Well, Chaz recently did a podcast on Nicest Nation, and he talked a little bit about, this, like we were talking about, low quality answers, and you get, maybe people giving satirical answers or, whatever it may be, and you get 1,000 comments, but then you got to sift through the wheat, and get the wheat from the chaff, right? And so not all groups are created equal, unfortunately, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. A minute ago, you said something about, Facebook as a platform could have some criticisms. Obviously, I'm always trying to build out LTK to be the best, platform that I can make it, at least. What are some of the issues you feel like are in those spaces, or maybe it's just maybe not those spaces specifically, but the platform, and something that we could do to try and improve on that, or the benefit of the Discord is it is so flexible, and we can kind of create things differently, that maybe we can backfill that shortcoming. So are there anything that you can think of that's particularly just grates on your nerves when you get on those platforms?
The algorithm, right, is just if you're on Facebook, you're going to be shown a bunch of crap that maybe you don't want to see, right? It's just there. It's the nature of the news feed. And I think a lot of people are turned off by that, and that's fine. It is just the nature of the platform, and that's what's cool about Discord. That's what's great about Discord, is you make the community what you want it to be. And I'm sure there are trash servers on Discord. I'm just not a part of them, right? I hang out in the well-manicured spaces and in the communities that provide value. And really, that's what I get out of Facebook too, is I just try to spend my time in those like well-curated spaces. But Facebook as a platform is it's very old. It skews towards old people, right? So the younger generations are just not on Facebook. And so you think about the future of like connecting with people. Facebook is not like high on the list for me. Is like, how do we create good communities and reach, all age groups? Facebook appears to be, just aging, right? Yeah. And with that, there's, the inherent nature of sponsored content and bots and all that good stuff is there's a lot. That's what I mean about there's a lot about Facebook that's criticizable, but it really comes down to just a well curated community.
Yeah.
Right. Regardless of what platform you're on, it's like, how involved are the people who are committed to making this space great? And that's what really makes the community shine, right? And so that's why I feel great about being in LTK. Clearly, you and the other folks that are moderating the space care a lot about, your mission here, and you have events all the time, and the community building is just fantastic. So, and I've said to you before that, Facebook also just seems like very, very egotistical, right? We have a lot of big egos on Facebook where, I often go into spaces and I have a reputation for saying that's incorrect or you're wrong or here's a correction, right? And that really strikes a nerve on Facebook. I will say I get a lot of pushback at times depending on where I am and who I'm speaking to, but there are a lot of really big egos on Facebook, and I have encountered that 0 times on LTK. So that's I've sung the praises of this community before for that reason. It's just everybody's here to learn, everybody's here to grow. There really isn't put downs, right? On Facebook, you'll see just some icky things. I'll just leave it at that. Fair. I don't want to be totally trashed. I don't want to trash completely. Like I said, it's all about curating the right community. There's definitely gems. But yeah, just different platforms, right? This is a gaming platform. And so you have gaming communities here, and we're all about having fun here. So I think that just Discord inherently has kind of a leg up for that reason.
Well, I really appreciate you saying all those kind of things, and I do believe that having that right mission, that core mission of what the group is there for, is such a huge aspect. You said we learn so much from you all the time, but a minute ago you said you also get to take away from these various different communities. Has there ever been like I said, we from the field side we learn and we take so much from the academic side. Has there ever been anything that kind of caught you off guard where you took something back from the field or from someone who just had practical experience or just kind of everyday experience that either helped you in the lab or just kind of gave you that extra kernel of knowledge that you didn't have before?
Constantly. So I can't really think of like an aha moment or like a really standout moment just because it's constant. It's all the time. I'm a sponge. And so when I'm in these spaces, whichever it is, a general entomology group, a pest group on Facebook or LTK, I'm just absorbing, even just passively absorbing. Over time, it becomes very clear to me, like, which pests are routinely problematic. That's not something that I would even, I can't infer that on my own from the lab or from, I'm not in the field every day. I'm in the field sometimes, for sure. But not every day. And another thing that's great about working for a global company or a national company and being a part of these online groups is I see stuff from all over the country, all over the world. And so if you are, not really involved in the social media or the online community type things, you're only going to be seeing, what's right in front of you, or even like your local diversity of pests or whatever. And so your scope is going to be really limited and your exposure is going to be really limited. So just by being in online communities is like, I'm just going to see everything. And from that, patterns emerge really quickly. And so that's one thing that I've taken away is like, which pests are like routinely problematic and why? And so that's definitely something, but I really just love to see all of the discussion about, the practical elements of the work, because people in my role, the research and development people were making tools and products and equipment and whatever for you. And so, as anybody knows, the best way to make a terrible product is to never connect with your consumers, right? Yes, right. And so, that's why I'm here, right? I'm connecting with end users, right? It's so critical to see what the people on the front line are doing and what they're needing and what's challenging them so that we, in our labs and in our ivory towers can build equipment and tools and all that stuff that will work and that will be well received.
So you mentioned a minute ago that the group is fun. That we kind of do the events and stuff like that. Of course, we're a gaming group, right? And so you're in here. You have to be a gamer by nature, right? So that has to be something that at least appealed to you when you saw it. What games do you play? What do entomologists like to play? Are you out there
Yeah.
shooting them up? Are you doing the little job simulator games? Are you a story based
Mhm.
person? What are you playing?
I like my games to not stress me out. And so my husband, he games, we game. I've actually been a gamer like my whole life. I play MMOs
Okay.
and single player games. And that's why, like I might not lean in too much in the Discord server with games because I know that you guys play a lot of like first person shooter games. And I'm like, it stresses me out a little much
Fair
to
enough.
be shot at. But yeah, I played World of Warcraft in my youth, like way before it was even remotely socially acceptable to talk about. And
Yes.
so, we hid that. We did that privately. We didn't talk about it. And I actually met my spouse on a different MMO. So I met him on a super obscure European MMO called Tibia,
Okay.
and it's very RuneScapey. It's very. I think it came out in
We're
like
doing a
early
RuneScape thing right
2000s.
now. So
I know. I've never touched RuneScape, but Tibia is like really similar,
okay.
but it's European. So we do a lot of that. It's very MMO. It's very cooperative. Like you build a 15-man team and you go kill a boss for good loot and that kind of stuff. Very community based. It's actually
Right.
how I got started on Discord. It's via that video game. And then I love Bethesda games. So
Oh
Fallout, Elder
yeah.
Scrolls, love those games. Those are single player, but my husband and I we sit on the couch and we pass the controller back and forth, and it's real fun. So
That
I'm part of the gaming community, but not necessarily with the rounds and the
No, you
teams and
are a full blown gamer. Listen,
shooting.
this whole idea that you have to be a competitive, person, no way. You are totally a gamer. You're one of us. In fact, I resonate with that story so much because that's exactly how me and my wife met. On an obscure video game called Conan Exiles. It was, and it's the same kind of thing. The video games is what got me introduced into Discord. First time I was like, I gotta download a social media app to play a game. Like, this is kind of funky. But once I got in here, I started, messing around with it. I was just blown away. I was like, holy cow, like, this really does. I can see why people do this. It takes it and it really amplifies it to the next level. And so that's super cool because, a lot of times, I guess those kind of more buttoned up professionals, there's kind of this misconception that video games are a waste of time, or it's not a common pastime, or that there's no relatability with upper or senior management or people who occupy senior roles, and that's just not the case. I posted something about that on LinkedIn recently about how many, I think it was 66% of Americans now game, and that means I did the whole breakdown. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I mean it was like millions and millions of people who are ranging from that millennial to Gen X, and even some boomers definitely play games. And I think it's a great pastime. It's an awesome activity, and as the technology has gotten so advanced, video games now actually eclipse. They're the number one consumed media source that there is, right? So, and it doubles the television and film industry. Now, COVID and things like that, they never really saw that recover after, in the movie theaters. But the video game space has just continued to just explode and explode up. And you've got all these AI engines that are, and the newer engines like Unreal 5, where they're taking in these textures, they're scanning people in, and, I really do believe that in like 10, 15 years from now, there's not going to be traditional Hollywood sets, giant green screens and warehouses and all this stuff. They're going to scan your image in, and then they're just going to build out the world inside of a video game. You know what I mean? The fidelity is going to get that good. It is going to get that real. And so, those who are sleeping on it, or maybe, they shy away from video games because they're like, oh, that's just some, child's play thing. It's like, well, you might want to wake up, because there's, the most of us are out here doing it. And I think, but another benefit is that it does allow that bridge from, maybe the new people in the industry, or people who are kind of have an entry-level position, to have camaraderie and to build up some friendships and to get to network and know people. And so far, I feel like we're kind of venturing into new territory, mixing professional plus video game into the same space. Typically you're just playing with random people all over the internet, but when you have that shared boss that you're going in after and fighting that loot, and it's after 5 o'clock, and it doesn't matter, what your job title is or what company you work for, you're there to work together and slay that boss. It's such a great opportunity, and it's a lot of fun. And, I do feel like it builds something that our industry is inherently missing. We don't have a proverbial water cooler. And I don't know what the case is in Ecolab when you're actually in the laboratory. I'm sure there are a couple people that you can kind of chatter about, what's the zeitgeist, what's the news. But even that has to probably feel small after a while, right? That there's really only a couple of people. It's not like there's dozens and hundreds of people walking into your laboratory, right? And so, I thank you for sharing that, and you are a little bit quieter in the Discord about your gaming, so it's probably really cool to know that you're out there, you're doing the same thing. Looks like Jeff is asking, let's see, what do you say? What's your favorite innovation in the pest control industry that has occurred during your career? Favorite thing to study in the labs? ? And what is your favorite product on the market, or one that you find is a game changer? Oh my goodness, 3 different questions. You want to tackle those one at a time?
Yeah. Okay. So first one, what? Favorite innovation since I joined the industry? Right? Did I remember that correctly?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to say that things move kind of slowly. I've only been in the industry 8 years. Okay, so as you know, like we don't get new active ingredients all that often. We don't actually get like really big beefy innovations all that often. But I will say that a couple of things. Connected technology is the future. And I say that obviously as like I work for a global company, I work for a big company, I work for a company that can invest in these things, and I know that that's not true for a lot of the smaller businesses. And I know that if you're a small operation, it might not even be relevant. You might not need it, right? If you're purely, and Ecolab is completely commercial.
Right.
And so our business is really totally different than a lot of the residential only or the mixture businesses out there. So I just connected anything I think is just fascinating. So I'm not naming anything in particular, but just given how the industry is just so fascinated by, and not just us, the industry, but clients as well, are fascinated by insights. We want to know what's going on in our facilities.
Yeah.
We want early detection. Yes, we want the heat maps. We want their reports, and so I feel like that's just big, right? It's taking up a lot of space, and so I don't know about favorite, but like I spend a lot of time thinking about it, and I think a lot of people in our industry do. So there's one. I would also say that I consider myself a bedbug specialist. Okay. So if depending on who's asking, I'm a generalist, as you've seen. I can spout off about this bug or that bug or whatever, but I really like bedbugs. I think they're fascinating, and they're horrible little creatures, and somebody's got to be interested in them, and that's me. So I think Apprehend is a fascinating product. Yes. I know I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of people are fascinated by it. I want to say, like, I'm not endorsing, I'm not picking and choosing and
cool technology
by any means, but it is totally cool technology. And I think biopesticides in general are very cool technology. And that one is really the first one to show up and really stick, like really take hold. And when I first joined Ecolab in 2017, that had just hit the market. And so I was put in the lab and like, hey, play with this and, learn about it. And I did. And it's very cool. So that one I feel like is a very trailblazing product, but I would love to see more in that space, more biopesticides, and I hate to bring up the buzzword green products, but more green products that actually work, because they tend to have a reputation for like they don't really work, right? We want the heavy hitting, we want the neurotoxins, right?
Yeah. Spike it with a little exciter.
Right, exactly. They work, right? And green products tend to not work, but that one really does, and that's really cool, and I would love to see more of that.
Looks like Matt's here. He's asking a question, and Matt's actually been a really cool guest because I think he recently got his ACE entomologist certification. He's definitely a little quiet, but we have a sneaky suspicion he's incredibly smart. Let's see, a compounding question on Jeff's question. What does the training look like for field specialists/technicians to fully maximize the utilization of data acquired by these connected devices, to include the completed interpretation of said data and that create actionable items for the information obtained from these connected devices? Okay, this is actually this is a high level question, but it is so relevant because I spend a lot of human effort and capital. Like a lot of labor goes into checking and reporting and documenting and creating these trending reports, and I definitely feel like that as the tech gets better and they're able to communicate, all the devices are able to communicate together. They're all that, and the software becomes more intuitive instead of just having long spreadsheets of just line item data where it's able to actually interpret what does this data mean. Like you said, those hotspots and stuff, I think is going to be incredibly important. Is there any intuition that you have as far as how to maximize that? And then kind of to his first portion of the question, what does training look like for these field specialists or these technicians? Like how does one take just raw data and turn it into expert level pest control?
So it's such a big question, and
Yes.
of course Matt would ask. Matt is brilliant. Your intuition is correct. Matt is a brilliant guy. He works for Ecolab, so thanks for being here, Matt. So we're so kind of like on the forefront of a lot of this that it's really different depending on like what technology you're using, and some of them are like, we want to put this in the hands of the clients, right? So there are some connected technologies out there that are like direct to consumer, where like they kind of skip over the pest service provider completely. And pros and cons to that, right? And in that case, it's kind of like the pest service provider doesn't. It's whatever, right? They're bypassed. Other technologies, they're out there and they provide raw data, and it's up to you to interpret. And other technologies out there, they gather the data and then they analyze it for you,
Right.
which that's it's kind of like take it and run with it. I would caution that, at the same, how I am with like maybe not relying on the robots so much, not trusting them blindly, of course, but when the systems are robust and like we can see the data in real time and then verify it with actually an observable situation, that builds confidence, right? So I would certainly advise that is anytime you have a new technology that you're using, don't just rely on it blindly, but really make sure that what it's telling you is in line with like what you're actually seeing, because like you're the trustworthy one, right? You're the human, you're there, what's going on. But so help me understand the question a little bit more. It sounds like the question was like, what training do we want to see for the operator for using these technologies, or help me understand?
Yeah. Let me kind of tackle it a little bit myself, and then we'll reread it. I think, it's one thing when these apps or these softwares, they kind of just compile data. Maybe they give you some trend report information, but I think the better overall goal is to really start to connect it with all the peripheral information. How many days did it rain last month? What's your average humidity level been in these areas? And I know some, things like that maybe aren't exactly counting bugs on a glue board, right? And having a better understanding of the site map, right? And so if the technology can actually begin to adapt some of these other peripheral things and say, where you can take all the data, you can take all the trend reports and kind of dump it into a ChatGPT type language model and say, hey, what's going on at this facility? And it says, okay, listen, the last 45 days you've experienced, 20 something days of rain. It was very concentrated in these weeks. We saw an uptick of activity in these areas. because part of your sitemap, is either associated with like bay doors or loading docks or some kind of vulnerability that's more susceptible to outdoor pressures, right? That this is kind of what's going on, and that really at this moment it's completely a human element for that, right? There's just no software that's going to really look at the big picture of things. And as far as like training goes, I would say, it's one thing to just input data and then extract data, right? And you can teach most people to do that. I think it's the time and the wisdom that kind of comes with, feeling and understanding your seasons, right? Seasons kind of they're different every year, and the amount of energy that's in the ocean and how much these big storms come in, and then how that affects the weather patterns for the whole next year. It seems abstract, but we as people get an intuition for that. I've always kind of said that, like, every year in our market, at least, it feels like there's like the bug of the year, right? That like whatever it is, there's just kind of like this constant reoccurring. It's like, oh, we had sod webworms, or like for this year particularly, it's like American cockroaches, right? It feels like American cockroaches are popping up like everywhere, and that seems to be like the constant service request callback. And having integrated systems that can look at the notes and say, okay, what's causing callbacks? What's popping up in the electronic devices? What's been the weather patterns? Has there been excessive rainfall that's caused to water levels rising in the sewers? These kinds of things are beyond intuition. There is something happening there, and I think getting out, boots on the ground, it's gonna, I really wish technicians spent less time actually checking individual boxes and counting bugs, because that takes up so much time, and instead we're looking around the site and saying, okay, this is what's going on here, you know what I mean? And really trying to take that in with all of this year's data, and even maybe previous year's data, to help with next year's predictions, right? Because you can do things today, whether that be like infrastructure change, reorganizing the layout of the building, or sometimes companies will get this opportunity. They're like, hey, we're reshifting things around, and we're only going to get this one opportunity, and it's like, oh, this is the perfect moment I get to suggest major solutions that you otherwise wouldn't implement, right? And so I think long term, that's what the training needs to look like. The training needs to look like taking just a wider field of view, right, as opposed to such a narrow field of view. I think we get caught up sometimes looking at the individual insect and not the environment, right, and the habitat that we're operating in.
Yeah. So I have two things to say about that, based on some of the things that you said. One, I would caution. I do a lot of cautioning.
That's okay.
It's like my thing. So it seems to me, like in my experience, any technology that tries to do everything is gonna suck a little bit at all of those things.
Yeah, fair enough.
So if we're trying to do way too much, and there is such a thing as too much data, there is. Yeah. We get too much noise, too much data, and it really kind of clouds like what is it that we're actually looking at. And so I'm really not. I don't have a lot of confidence in those types of technologies that try to factor in literally everything and then boil it down to here's what you need to do. That's way overwhelming, right? So that's the first thing. And then the other thing that I wanted to say was, I think that broadly speaking, there's kind of this concern, or maybe not a concern. Maybe some people are welcoming of it, but the idea that AI and connected technologies are going to replace the technician. And do too much, right? And or rather, I'll reframe it like this: like there's a criticism of some pest control operators where it's like you're trap checkers. You go in, you check your trap, check your boxes on your service report, and then you leave.
Unfortunately.
And that's a real thing that happens. And involving connected technologies in that, and involving AI in that is actually not really going to change that or make that any better, right? You can have these technologies kind of like crunch your numbers and do that for you, but ultimately it's really how you spend your time at the account, right? You want to show up, you want to use your own eyes and put eyes on things because, as I've said before, you are the expert in that space. And I don't really have any confidence that any AI model or really any connected solution is going to tell you like this is what you need to do here.
Yeah.
Certainly they can provide insights and give us, valuable data, but that should be, we go and we see that data, but we should be using that as a tool to do our jobs better in that space, and not, just allowing us to become a different type of track checker, right? Where we show up and we see, well, there wasn't, the devices said X and then these devices said Y, so check, and I'm moving. So it doesn't really change anything. It really comes down to you spending time in that space and you becoming the expert of what's going on there. So, I think that's really where the training should focus is how to use these individual tools to make you a better technician or operator of whatever kind. Is how do they elevate you instead of like doing your job for you.
Right. I definitely think that's the number one fear everybody kind of has. And maybe the, overly ambitious ideas. It's like that, it's going to somehow either A, it's going to make technicians lazier, or B, get technician, from the technician's hopeful side, it's like, oh, well, I won't have to do as much work. Right. And I just think that's a total fallacy. I guess in an altruistic way, I hope that it allows, some of that time on site to stop being spent, like you said, being a trap checker and really kind of addressing the site as a whole. And part of that obviously is going to be, allocation of the appropriate amount of time. Part of that's going to be, a proper IPM plan, right? If you feel like you're doing just trap checking all the time and you're not getting a chance to do that other stuff, and then maybe that's a major red flag that something about this service agreement needs to be completely reconfigured, right? Or your route or something like that. Maybe that's a conversation you have to have with your service manager, where it's like, hey, listen, I'm not effective out here. I'm just a body counting, bugs or whatever, and I need the time necessary to do these things. But I guess in a way, I hope that these connected technologies alleviate that time demand, at least to some degree, and open up that space for us to be able to do more intuitive work, more bigger picture work, and offer feedback that's more integrated to the whole site, as opposed to feedback based on what this little trap can catch on this little corridor, and really kind of address the bigger things at hand. And I know that that's going to be not the case for a lot of people. Like you said, residential, they're not going to worry about that kind of thing. But big companies out there like Ecolab and Terminex and Orkin, they do exist, and they service major accounts, and they service these food manufacturing facilities, these hospitals, or these kinds of places that do need that level of security. At the end of the day, that's really what it's a form of security. It's product and contamination security. And so I'm hopeful for it. Like you said, I think expressing caution is the best thing that we can do, especially in this infancy, in these early phases. But I love Matt's question, because I think it gets those wheels turning about how can we think about pest control in a different way, or at least what the day-to-day job of it looks like. There's a lot of abstract stuff that comes from uppers and companies, or there's a lot of abstract stuff that may come from the laboratories or the universities, and then it seems like sometimes it just falls apart when it gets into the field, right? And when you get it into the hands of the guys that are out there, just make what I mean. And so I hope that this technology and the camaraderie that we get to build, in these kinds of spaces, kind of start to bridge that gap, where that disconnect from the original idea doesn't fall apart as much once it's actually implemented.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing on that, and it's related to something that you said very recently, but what's going to be so critical to keep these things from falling apart when they get into our hands is that continuous feedback loop between the creator of the product and the user of the product, right?
Yes.
So at Ecolab, we have this amazing benefit of we innovate internally. We build our own stuff. And so our feedback loop is completely internal. And so we Ecolab are making a product that we Ecolab are using. And so that feedback loop is just like, it's right there. And so the continuous feedback is so important for improving that product, but also, making sure it's what you actually need and what you're going to use. And so, yeah, I know that there are manufacturers in this Discord, and that's awesome because, manufacturers connecting directly with their end users is you got to do it. You got to do it.
So how do we thread that fine line between what's proprietary, what's free market competitiveness, right, and each company trying to get that leg up versus what's for the betterment of the entire industry, or having a more spirit of cooperation. I think that's something that I personally am a big advocate for. Is less of the overly competitive nature and more of the cooperative nature. But this is business, and people are here to make money, and nobody wants to lose their clients out to the next guy, and so there is that kind of fine line. What does that line look like for you? And because you mentioned this internal feedback loop. Is it a problem if that feedback loop starts to expand and you're getting loops from other outside sources, or is that
Yes.
completely inappropriate? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, kind of. I feel this too. I echo what you said about, like, it's business. I get it. We make money. We're here. We are literally competitors, right? We totally are. But at the same time, like, rising tide raises all ships, right? We helping each other is often mutually beneficial. So there is tons about our industry that is proprietary and that you won't see. Even there are tons of times where I see questions posted on public spaces like this, and I see all the manufacturers going, I'm not touching that. And that's the nature of business. And so what I like to do, my involvement in these communities is I say what I'm allowed to say, and I help in ways that I'm allowed to help. And there are absolutely going to be ways where, like, I can't touch that, and I won't. And I value first of all, I value my job and keeping my job.
right.
But I serve Ecolab first and foremost, right? And I want to see Ecolab succeed because that then we all succeed and I succeed. So yeah, there's always going to be that element. But if you want to be part of that feedback loop with manufacturers, there are ways in which that can happen. Like, non-disclosure agreements are a very common thing in our industry, and I know that manufacturers reach out to potential testers to say, hey, we want to put our brand new, not yet on the market product in your hands. Sign an NDA. You get to be a part of that feedback loop and experience it for yourself firsthand. So there's always a route for that. But yeah, we gotta protect our intellectual property. It's just the way the world works.
Yep. Fair enough. Hey, sometimes it takes a little bit of the informal spaces to lower those guards and say that, hey, not everything is, so competitive in nature, and just to have mindfulness to know, where that line stops, and, where people need to protect their own industry, protect their own interest. Matt asks, he says he wants to get one last question in. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement in the Minnesota Pest Management Association? Are you a member there? Are you a leader in that group, or what is your involvement like?
Yeah, I'm currently the sitting president of the Minnesota Pest Management Association. So
Dang.
I love doing that. I love being involved in industry associations. I also sit on the council for the Professional Women in Pest Management for that national association. So I had a call with them today about how can we advance the development and encouragement of women in the pest management industry. So I love getting involved with association work. I think it's awesome. It's the very old school way of doing kind of what we're doing now, is connecting and networking and lifting each other up and for the betterment of our industry. So I'm all about that. For Minnesota in particular, it's a really small association. We are being up north. We don't experience what you guys do in the south with year-round pests and the tropical species and the crazy introductions. Like, it's very chill in Minnesota, literally. But also, like, it's very laid back, and so it's been great. It's been I've been on the board for, I think, 3 years now, so it was a pretty rapid rise to the seat of president because a few people dropped out, and so it kind of bumped me up a little bit. But awesome to get that experience with industry association and see it from the inside. And right now we're revising our bylaws, which sounds a little boring, but it's been really cool to be involved in that. And yeah, we don't do the sponsored golf outings or the fundraising golf like y'all do in Texas and Florida, but I would love to see us grow to do some of that stuff someday. But it might just be the nature of our association that we're little. But we do joint association membership. So if you become a member of the Minnesota Association, you're also a member of the National. So you get all of the benefits of the National Association if you sign on as a Minnesota State Association member.
Heck yeah, that's definitely a good little extra plug there.
Yeah.
I love it, and I'm a huge. I recently just started attending my own little small. It's my market, right? The Greater Houston Pest Control Association, and I've only gone to a couple of meetings. I really do want to get more involved in those spaces. Like you said, I do believe in them, and I think the NPMA does so much good work for our industry, and I think a lot of people kind of gloss over it. It's either they just don't have time for it, or it's the boring stuff or whatever. But I really do believe that you guys do such a service for us, and so I thank you for being a part of it first off, and for pushing those. And and I'm a huge advocate for anybody listening to reach out to your local association, reach out to your statewide association, get involved. Because it is such a small industry, right? One of the benefits of it being a small industry is that it doesn't take long to get to know everybody, and those connections can be found everywhere. Those are the environments where people are willing to connect. Those are those environments where people are willing to share with one another. And if you're feeling stagnated in your role, or if you feel like there's definitely more that you could be doing, get involved, and chances are you'll meet the right people. They'll point you in the right direction, or you'll get involved in legislation day or whatever it may be, right? Just to be tuned in and listening to that stuff. We are pushing up on the 1 hour mark. So I do want to just kind of do a last couple of questions here with you. Recently, there was a kind of a viral video that went around with Charlie Kirk, and he was talking about pink collar jobs and how whatever, right? We're not gonna have to go down that, but I find it interesting because there have been more lady technicians showing up, and I know that on the academic side, maybe it was heavily male dominated, and so maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about that experience. I know for certain that. Like trucking and other industries that may have been kind of considered male only or male dominated aren't as physically demanding as something else like being a bricklayer or stonemason or something like that. And there's definitely huge opportunity for good careers, good access to entry level jobs that are high paying jobs that the ladies can get involved in. And so tell me a little bit about that. What do you feel like the female presence in the industry has been like, and what can we do to continue to encourage that?
Yeah, great question. So I will say that as somebody who works in the corporate back office lab space, my experience is going to be different than what boots on the ground folks are going to see and feel. I have received nothing but support from my networks, both within Ecolab and with outside Ecolab with back office roles. But really, that's historically that's where the women have been, right? The office ladies, right?
Yes.
And in academia, the historical entomology is very male dominated, and I would say it's only like within the past several decades that we've seen lots more women in that space. And looking at my online communities, it's full of women. Women actually we like bugs, like a lot of us do. And my experience is that hating bugs or being afraid of bugs is a very traditionally feminine stereotype. Right. But my experience is it's 50-50. I routinely encounter men that are just absolutely terrified of bugs. And so that's not the barrier, right? It's not like bugs are icky. It's really not. And I think, obviously there's a physical demand element to it, and you can't ignore that. But I think a lot of it has really just come down to like when you've got a boys club, it tends to kind of stay a boys club until people like punch through it.
Yes.
And so we've seen a lot of women punching through these boys clubs in recent history, and that has been awesome. And like I said, only in the industry like 7 or so years, but anytime I go to like a professional women in pest management event or the women's forum put on by NPMA, you every single time we have somebody say, I've been in the industry 30 years, 40 years, and I can't even believe all the women that I'm seeing here in front of me. Like it's incredible. And so we have done a great job as an industry, just like opening the doors for women in service roles and frontline roles. And, you know, every woman that I've spoken to that does this work on the front line says like, I love it.
Yes.
My clients love to have a woman a lot of the time, you know, not all the time, of course, we
Yes.
still got, you know, stereotypes, but a lot of the times, you know, a woman technician knocks on the door and there's like a very pleasant surprise, you know, like I'm glad to see this. And,
Yes.
you know, I think stereotypically, generally speaking, women, you know, relate to their clients maybe differently or, you know, bring a different flavor to that. And a lot of people really appreciate that and they see that. And obviously, there's countless amounts of evidence, you know, in unquantifiable evidence that like women do well in this work. So
Yes.
it's just, you know, spotlighting that more and really showcasing that like, yeah, we can do this. And it's, you know, representation does matter, right? When women see other women doing that type of work, it's like, oh, look, she's crushing it. I could totally do that too. And so we're doing that and we're seeing the benefits of that.
One of the long-term dreams and goals that I would have for LTK, if I could have things my way, is that I would love to get out there at like the job fairs and the high schools and the colleges, and one of the reasons why I've been so thankful to interview people like you and Maria and Sorrentino and Sylvia Kinmuir and stuff is to have that content to spotlight and say, and there's also people out there in the field like Jenny Wilson and I have a coworker named Rachel. I mean, there are people out there who are doing it, and I would, you don't want to just be recruiting 50% of the schools, right? You don't want to be trying to recruit from just 50%. There's a whole other half there, and they, like you said, there's always been kind of a love for pest and like don't squish that bug or the appreciation of butterflies, butterfly art, butterfly tattoo. So we know that not all bugs are icky, and so just to kind of dispel with that and to kind of really encourage that like you should be doing this, right? It's not a question of like is this appropriate for you or could you do it. It's like, no, you should be doing it. You should be one of our champions. You should be one of the people out there who's advocating for treatments to be done the right way while also keeping people safe and keeping products safe, keeping our food safe, right? But also not having this exterminator, eliminate everything kind of T1000 kind of mindset. It doesn't work like that. And I have again, I've only been in the industry for about 11 years, so not a whole lot longer than you have, but I have seen that shift over time and that kind of softening of and even changing of the vernacular of from exterminator to pest control technician. And I think that's so important, and we do need to continue to lean into that. It opens up more jobs and availability for everybody, and I think it makes our industry better. It gets us out of these kind of blinders of a single way of viewing things. And if we want to embrace these new technologies like the biocides and the green pesticides and apprehend and stuff like that, you were talking earlier about those Facebook spaces and having big egos. We have to dispel of some of that ego stuff so that way we can be open-minded to some of this new technology or these new methodologies that are, in opposition to just spraying and praying, right? So, all right, one last question, because I really appreciate you for coming on, and I appreciate you for your time. Thank you so much for just hanging out and talking with us. Is there one person that that comes to mind that you think I should interview next, or that the audience would love to hear from? I know you mentioned maybe some mentors or some people that have been majorly impactful to your career, and if there's any way that we can reach out to them and get them onto the show as well.
a big question. There's so many people, pest control is a small world. It's a big industry, but it's a small world, right?
Yeah.
So many good people. Um, I already mentioned Andrew Sinefsky, and I think that you were on his
Yes.
podcast. Is that right? So I
Yes.
just want to say that either Holly or Andrew, I think, would be a great person to talk to specifically because I love what they're doing with kind of like building an entomology lab in
Yeah.
their small business. I think that's really cool. Obviously, I have a bias with that, but I love to see their LinkedIn posts about like what's going on in their
Me
entomology
too.
lab, and it's just so rare and unusual to see a small business, invest in that. I know so many businesses out there. They're either like single operate, sole owner operator, or small enough where like we can't really justify hiring an entomologist. We'll just kind of like lean on the industry resources, which is fine, but I'm fascinated by what they're doing in their lab. And every time they post a picture, I'm like, what are you guys doing in your lab?
Yes.
So what's
Yes.
new? What are you guys building? And I think that's really cool. So I'd love to hear them talk about that.
I will definitely reach out to Holly and Andy. I know me and Andy talk all the time. He's a very good friend of mine. I should definitely have him on the show. And from the technician standpoint, I definitely agree with that. And it changes the mindset from the moment you walk into the door, right? Where if every day you come in and instead of, just loading up your stuff and your chemical in your truck and you're heading out, that you take, 15-30 minutes or whatever to go in and look at your colonies and and have these little projects and do a little bit of science and kind of be in a laboratory setting, because so many of us don't get that opportunity, and you get to be in those kind of professional settings all the time. And I think some of us kind of either look down on ourselves. We definitely face the stigma from the customer base that people will definitely look down on us at times. It's just kind of a general labor or something of that nature. And I think if especially new technicians have that experience where they're walking in the door and before they're even getting their day started, they're doing a little bit of science and they're in that kind of setting, it would really help to boost their confidence both in the field and the skills that they would have and develop, the knowledge that they would get, but also just even in that personal kind of pat on the back that like, hey, what you're doing is worthwhile. It is a serious trade skill. And so, yes, I am a huge supporter of that, and I couldn't agree more. Well, Miss Morgan, thank you so much for taking your time and talking to us. Thank you for being a part of the Discord and for sharing your knowledge and information. We love that you're a gamer, and we want to see more of that. So come out of your shell a little bit, do some MMOs with us, do some video gaming with us, join in on our events.
Just don't shoot at me. I don't like to
No,
be
no,
shot at.
no. We'll put together an event for something that shoot me a text of a couple of games that are up your alley, and we'll put together an event that targets it. Because I can promise you're not the only one, right? If you have that opinion, I can promise you there's 50 or 100 other people that share the same sentiment. So let's lean into that, and I will see you on the flip side.
Thank you so much. It's been real nice.
Thanks for tuning into the Licensed to Kill podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful, informative, and engaging. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. It really helps us to reach more listeners like you. Have a question or a topic that you'd like us to cover in a future episode? Connect with us through our Facebook, YouTube, and most importantly, our Discord. Until next time, this is your host, Marcus, reminding you to stay sharp, stay legendary, stay connected.